Tuesday, August 13th, and it's Tuesday because yesterday was a state holiday, a Victory Day, so it's, I guess it's been over 3 weeks since our last regular town council meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk.
Council Perry,
Present.
Council Hilton,
Present.
Council Katz,
Present.
Council Coulter,
Present.
Council Cook,
Present.
Councilor DeMedeiros is absent, and Councilor Driggs is absent.
Okay. Again, welcome, good evening. It is Tuesday, August 13th in Tiverton. We will start as usual with the consent agenda. We have approval of the town council minutes from July 22nd. We acknowledge receipt of various reports from our town administrator, the police and fire department overtime reports, the July 2019 department monthly report, the planning board administrative officer report of activities for July, Ms. Susan Gill. Also from Ms. Gill is a memorandum on Long Plex surety, and also from the town administrator on the same topic with a memorandum and approval of tax assessor abatements. Are there any items from the consent agenda to be pulled for future or for further consideration? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Great. That's unanimous. 5-0. We now move right into public presentations, announcements, and comments. We have Ms. Kelly Levesque from Tiverton Days to give us a report on the wrap-up of the Tiverton Days 2019, report of events and appreciation to our town and
I just walked in the door.
community partners.
You're late.
I am.
Let's go.
Take it away,
Hi.
Kelly.
I'm here just to do a little wrap-up for Tiverton Days 2019. We had a fabulous event, and Mother Nature was most kind to us. We had wonderful weather. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging everyone that served on our small but mighty committee in alphabetical order, in no order of importance, because everyone was important. George L. Zabak, Sally Black, Joan Shabbat, Pat Curran, Debbie Estrella, who was our liaison from the Tiverton Public Library, Linda Larson, Dieta Moran, Mike Napolitano, Barbara Pelletier, and myself. Briefly, with my 3 pages of notes, I'm just going to go event by event and just thank a few people and tell you how everything went. Some of you were able to attend something, some were on vacation, and we hope that the different vacations will be scheduled for next year, not the last weekend in July. Our first event was Friday night at Pecasset School. Thanks to our new superintendent, Dr. Sanchioni, we were actually granted permission to use the indoor bathrooms at Pecasset School, which was wonderful. So some of the attendees were able to see inside the schools and the renovations that were done for the first time. Let me just actually back up real quick. It was a 3-day event, obviously. We raised $4,300 in donations. Our expenses are not finalized yet, but our account is here with the treasurer's office downstairs, so that should be done, I would think, within the next month or so. So for Friday night, we estimate we had about 1,200 people in attendance. We had 3 music sponsors, George's Gas and Service, who donated our stage, lighting, sound equipment, and also he was our talent booker. McRae's Seafood and Napa Auto Parts were our music sponsors. Miss Patty L. Zabak sang the national anthem, and then we had 3 bands that each played for 1 hour. The first one was a very different musical genre. It was bluegrass. We had some older people in the very beginning, so it was good. And then as the families came in, we got to some more current music. We had 3 food vendors and then 5 dessert vendors. For the first time, we were able to rope off Pecasset and have student volunteers down at the base of the parking lot that would enable people to come in and use the parking lot for handicap parking. We had never done that before. We used the bathrooms, as I said, and we had student volunteers. Much thanks to, obviously, the Tiverton Fire Department and Randy LeBeau, who are our fire tenders. DPW brought us up the trash barrels, opened the gates for us, and stored our fire pits both before and after the event. Tiger Tree and Landscaping donated all the wood. Tiverton Police did a couple walkthroughs and talked to people. Tiverton Little League allowed us to use their electricity at the concession stand, which we were most grateful for. And the rec committee obviously gave us the field usage, school department, and then the Tiverton Library Services set up a kids craft table and information for anyone, adults and kids. Saturday was our big day with our parade. We had about 56 units this year. I had 2 assistants, Bill Vieira and Kristen Candera, who were immensely helpful to me as I was running around, and I didn't end up marching, which I was very sad about, but I did hop a ride with Bruce Reimels, and I got to go down in one of the fire department vehicles. Tiverton Police Department, Fire Department, and DPW, obviously all were in attendance at the parade. Susan Anderson. Susan's not here tonight. I don't know who Susan represented as she walked, but she did walk. She was the only, I invited all the boards and commissions. She was the only person that took me up on the invite. She was in a historical gowned, so I'm not sure if she was representing the Historical Cemetery Committee or the Historical Society, but Susan Anderson gets big props by me because she walked by herself. Counselors Perry, Hilton, D. Medeiros, and Mr. Katz all walked. Thank you so much. And my commentators were Joan Shabbat and Randy LeBeau. They were outside Sakonnet River Outfitters, which very graciously allows us to use their electricity and their Wi-Fi. The parade is taped by Stephen Reese and this year his brother Dan. And they live stream it on Facebook and then they upload it to YouTube, which is wonderful for people to be able to see who weren't able to attend or unable to attend. And thanks to Barbara Pelletier, who is a very talented seamstress, and she makes all the banners that we carry every year with the sponsors' names and our event. Next year, we will have one that says elected officials. I got that message from someone. We then went to the Monarch Butterfly event and the scavenger hunt at the library. So obviously we're grateful to the library and the Arts Council, which sponsored it. We did give away 12 random prizes this year for the scavenger hunt. The scavenger hunt was very popular. We say it's not Amazing Race, so we don't want people, it's not first come, first serve for prizes. We draw them randomly at the end. And there's talk next year of doing a big prize. Yes, maybe a helicopter ride over Tiverton. We'll have to see. And then Sunday, my annual yoga day, we do yoga on the beach through Rachel, the owner of Nanaquacket Yoga Studio. Obviously, we're thankful for Rachel and to the Rec Commission who also gave us use of the beach. We were up on the pavilion, and then some people were actually out on the sand as well behind us. We had about 50 participants, and then those participants are then given coupons to walk over to Coastal Roasters and enjoy a cup of coffee or tea, compliments of Coastal Roasters. And then, last but not least, we head on to the fire department, who does an open house annually. I thought this was the best one they had ever done. Thanks to Chief Malo, Josh Ferreira, and Bruce Reimels for organizing that, and for all the firefighters who were present both Friday night and on Sunday. And then Crumbelievable, the bakery across the street, also participated and had some specials, which was very nice. We will, in the next 2 weeks, because I don't think it's going to work out for next week, have a lessons learned meeting where we'll get to sit down and put our heads together. We started at the library on Saturday Saturday during the event, just kind of writing some things down. But if anyone has any feedback to share, positive or negative, I most certainly will be open to hearing it and writing it down and thinking about it for next year. We will be back with a date soon for next year. We're not doing this run around and, call people last minute that they have to get all their paperwork in. So we'll be doing that much earlier.
Okay to take a little time off.
I have to, you know what? I have to go to Pardon Gray planning, so I got to take one hat off, one hat on, and then put this hat back on. So I will be back in the next few weeks, and we do hope to do a fall event as well, where, like we did that pumpkin lighting a few years ago and s'mores on the beach. We're hoping to do something like that as well.
I must say that you did an amazing job of taking it. She was as energized and bubbly as really.
Thank you. definitely is my forte. It was fun.
And we have leftover monarch butterfly seed
Oh,
milkweed
good.
seed pod
Good, I want one.
packages. They're in the back, so if anyone coming in and out of town hall, feel free to seed your spots.
And on that note, I think I'm done.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
And,
Thank
look
you all.
forward
Thank
to-
you. And thank you, Jan. I'm sorry, Jan and Nancy. I didn't thank you guys and all of your staff. No, thank you. Seriously, you kept me on track, and I couldn't have done it without you guys. And I know so much more now than I did last year, and I'll be that much better next year. Thanks all.
Good job.
I just wanted to second Mrs. Pelletier's congratulations and thanks to Kelly. Really an excellent job and a lot of work I know goes into that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we appreciate that public presentation. We have a public hearing that's advertised from our Tiverton Public Library, sponsored by our library director, Ms. Catherine Damiani, requesting approval of a sound variance and special event permit for an outdoor concert series that would be on August 22nd and September 5th from 5:30 to 8. This is your opportunity to get some free publicity if you'd like, and then we'll open it up for any public comments.
Sure. So we actually, in the past, have gone on the premise of not understanding that we needed a sound variance. And then when I was brought on this year, we had talked to Nancy, and the town clerk's office graciously let us know that we definitely did need the sound variance. So we want to make it right. And we really, yes. So we are here just to say that we submitted our application, and the summer concert series has been something that we've been trying to get going for a couple years now, and it's really started to gain some traction. So we're really excited to have this outdoor event. In the event that it does rain or it's bad weather, the event is inside. So.
Would anybody like to be heard? This is a public hearing. Any questions or comments on the request for a sound variance and a special event permit, if needed?
So I just wanted to mention that I believe she might want to ask the council to waive the fee. It's like the town charging the town.
I think it was $35 altogether. So we're interested in seeing if the town council might
Maybe we
waive
could
that.
Probably pull it up, probably swing that, right?
I think we can. Mr. President, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve a sound variance for the Tiverton Public Library for August 22nd and September 15th between the hours of 5:30 PM and 8 PM, and waive the application fee of $10, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Second.
I'd just like to request we change it to September 5th instead of 15th.
Yes,
Oh.
please.
Sorry, what did I say?
And you said 15, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
And do we include the fee waiver in the motion, or do we need a separate motion for that?
Okay, to clarify, the dates are August 22nd and September 5th. 1/5. No, 5. Never, I
9-5. 9-5.
I need better glasses. 9/5.
Okay, we have a live motion to approve as requested and waive the $35 fee. This is a public hearing. Last call. Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
And then I'll make a motion to approve the special event permit for the Tiverton Public Library for a concert, 2 outdoor concerts to be held on August the 22nd and September the 5th of 2019 between the hours of 5:30 PM and 8 PM, and waive the fee of $25, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now switching into a Board of Licensing. Mr. A. Paul Fotiadis, Aaron Furtado, pronounced F&P LLC, doing business as Famous Pizza on Main Road, requesting approval of a victualling license. Again, my favorite license, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Didn't bring any free samples.
We always like the free samples.
Okay.
Is this
Usually
routine, or
Yeah,
what do we?
whatever we thought
Okay.
about it.
It's a change of ownership.
Just a
Yes,
change of
change of
ownership, okay. Well, while you're here, would you like to tell us how great your pizza is?
Well, you should already know, but.
I already
it's
know.
fantastic, yeah.
Wonderful. Would
changed.
anybody like to be heard on this matter? May I have a motion to approve as requested?
I'll move to approve Paul Fotiadis and Aaron Furtado, F&P LLC, DBA Famous Pizza at 433 Main Road, victualling license, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, thank you, appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck, guys.
Okay, we have, I'm sorry. We have two requests for, requesting permission to advertise bids from our DPW director. One is for a bituminous concrete crusher rental. Sounds really fun to me. I'd love to hear about that. And perhaps less exciting, the uniform rental service, but let's hear about both of those.
Yes, thank you. Rick Rogers, DPW. We accumulate over time road spoils, and we need to crush them to make gravel. So that's why we'd like the crusher rental. And the uniform rental service, basically the contract has expired, so we would like to put it out to bid, and that's for the uniforms for the DPW workers.
We have the support of the town administrator, and we've cleared legal. Okay. Does anybody wish to be heard on either of these requests?
Question, Rick. I was just wondering, we seem to rent this type of equipment. What is the cost somewhere here? And how often do we do it? How often do we rent this? Does it stay on the premises, or do we keep bringing it back? What?
No, over the years, basically, the last few years at least, has been A.J. Potter Jr. from Westport, and they come in with their crushing plant to DPW with their excavator. They load it up and put it in the stockpile for us. And then we use that when we do drainage and road work.
And how much does that cost? How many times do you have, is it just dropped there and we pay rent all the time, or does it come back and forth?
No, they bring their operators as part of the price. They have their excavator, their man watching. The crusher usually takes maybe 3 days, and the price depends on, we did it this year, we requested bids by the ton versus the hour. It used to be maybe, I think, around $600 an hour, and we do that once a year unless we accumulate a whole lot.
So
But-
once a year,
Yes.
and it's $600?
I think it was about $600 an hour, but I'd have to check, I don't remember, I'd have to look at the, yes.
How long
But-
does it take to?
Gen-
3 days.
What, pardon me?
She wanted to know
You
how
said
long
3
it takes.
days,
You
right?
said 3
Generally
days.
about 3 days,
So about $7,500 for the
yeah.
project?
Yep.
So I think
How
what,
much does it cost to buy one? A lot?
Oh,
I don't
Oh,
know.
gee, that's a good question, but I would hazard to guess that it would be, I don't know, $250,000 plus, and you'd have to rent the excavator.
All right. I
and-
just didn't know.
Yeah,
All right.
those are ballpark figures.
so it wouldn't be worth our while to go out and buy one. It's not-
Correct.
Right.
Right, correct. Not worth our while.
Right.
We'd love to have an excavator though, but
I
the,
had to ask because I didn't know. Okay. Thanks.
yeah.
Further questions or comments on either of these requests?
Make a motion, we approve the request to go out to bid.
I'll second that.
Is that for both?
For both?
We consolidate these?
Yep.
Objection?
For both?
We have a consolidated motion to approve them both. A live motion. Any
Second?
objection to
Done.
proceeding to a vote? All those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, general business. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items in a row by the town administrator. All right, just turn it over to you. Take us down the line.
Thank you. The first one is what is hopefully the last budget transfer we need to request. This is for legal services and more specifically Labor Council services where we exceeded the budgeted amount and had to transfer it from another account within the legal services category. I believe a lot of although the bills weren't really all that high throughout the year, it did add up. Most of this, I believe, is contract negotiations, and that has stepped up again recently with the 2 additional contracts that we have to negotiate. And by the way, just so that you know, I have asked department heads to take a good look at the transfers that we have requested in fiscal year 19 and see if we can draw some lessons from all these transfers that we do, and whether we should find out whether we should budget differently, essentially, instead of just relying on budget transfers. So we'll see if we can come up with some suggestions in that regard, but I want to do that well before our next budget cycle begins.
Which will be here before we know it. Right? It'll be here before we know it.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'll move to approve the transfer for fiscal year 19 of $13,671 from 1050-7159 Legal Services Litigation to 1050-7191 Legal Services Labor Council.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. All those in favor? All right, next.
The next one is a request for you to approve the first 1-year extension of the contract for Director Rick Rogers at DPW. The year flew by, and here we are. It's already past the first year. As I have explained in my request, and also, as you probably can tell from the evaluation, which is a confidential document that you had received, in my opinion, he's done a very, very good job, exceeding expectations on almost all criteria, and in several respects doing what I consider to be an outstanding job. I also recommend that the council approve the 2% salary increase, which is consistent with the FY20 budget.
It sounds like good news. Any questions or comments? Okay, may I have a motion to approve as requested?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments from the public?
I did just want to comment real quickly that during the budget process, I got a tour of the facilities and the relentless pitch for updated equipment, which was good from the director, and also working with him on some of the negotiations. I agree with the administrator's assessments here. Very professional and great to work with, and I hope we can keep him on board for years and years to come, well past the normal retirement age.
I'll second that also.
And so will I.
Excellent job.
That's great.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Okay.
Next is, you received the letter from Susan Gill relating to her filling in as interim administrative officer, and I wanted to make sure that it actually is on the agenda so it can be addressed. It currently has led to not just 1, but 2 vacancies in the planning office, which is a little bit too much. And we're struggling to deal with that. We are taking some measures to try to make sure that applicants don't fall through the cracks. But basically, the issue on the table is, and Susan can speak to it further, whether the council would want to compensate Ms. Gill for this work, which is a lot of work, and she works very hard at it, and she does a very good job, and it's basically a critical function. We have advertised the planner position also to be an administrative officer. We won't have the applications in, all of them, until the end of this month. So at the very least, for the time being, I would hope that we can accommodate this request and hopefully convince Susan Gill to come back and do the administrative officer work in the planning office.
So the dilemma we have is it put our legal counsel on the spot here with she can't serve as the chair of the planning board and administrator, at the same- even on a super short temporary interim basis? Is there any way around that, or are we?
And let me, because I probably should have mentioned that, but
Compensated, I should
I'm
say.
also
She's, of course,
speaking on
compensated.
behalf of Susan. I think she had indicated that she is willing to step down temporarily as chair of the planning board, which I believe is sufficient, but that may be the question
We can
for the
reappoint
solicitor.
vacancy at our pleasure then. Right. So that sounds like this good solution. Any other thoughts?
Well, I have a couple questions. For right now, who is the administrative officer right now? I mean, we have to have one by law. Somebody has to sign those applications.
What I have done, given that Susan chose to not do it until the council has reached the decision, I've worked with Geo to get someone to fill in who has the background, and that would be Matt Fabish, who has been working with the planning board, and in my opinion, can at least accept the applications that people want to submit, and make sure that applications get put into the pipeline and hopefully can be processed within the deadlines that we also have to meet, because otherwise it would mean that just because we don't have our staffing together, applicants get to suffer for it, and I didn't think that was an acceptable situation.
I understand that we have to have this, but may I ask, since Matt Fabish is an attorney, what his compensation is? I mean, is he charging us hourly to do this, and what is the rate? And how are we paying for this?
The current rate is, I think it's $1,200 per week, for which he is here 2 days a week, but also available beyond the hours that he's here. Now, I believe that if you...
Not 2 full days, though, just to be clear.
Right, not too full is, and I was going to get there. And I actually think that, it is a steep price to pay for, I believe, 6 hours per week, not counting the hours that he's available to work on things by phone. But even so, I'm hoping that we could come up with, if necessary, with a cheaper solution. Maybe the solution comes tonight, at least for the time being. If
Is it the
not,
solution, just to see if Ms. Gill will take that role? I guess the big question is what happens to the planning board if it doesn't have a chair? Does
okay,
that-
so, okay, that's
Well,
another one, but
I-
that's not the question that was asked.
Right.
Who is actually doing the administrative officer work? And I've also contacted Felix Zemmel of the Municipal Code Consulting Group to see if they have anyone with the planning background who could temporarily step in case that's needed. And he's looking into that right now.
Okay. I mean, just because paying an attorney to do this has to, I understand why Mr. Fabish has to do this, but it's the most expensive solution. So in addition to that, I mean, there are also some consulting planners out there who can be, AICP certified planners who can be hired. But I do have a question about this whole,
Not easy.
it's not easy, but there are a few of them out there that
Well, I hope
that
they
do
will
some
apply for the position.
that do some freelance work. But I do have a question about this payment thing. The charter says that you cannot serve on a board or commission and receive any compensation, or be an employee, right? So I'm curious, though, because there are some exceptions to that. I mean, I don't know what dollar amount makes you an employee. I don't know when something goes from being a stipend to being an employee. So, for example, the Board of Canvassers members are compensated. It's an unusual thing, but Rick Rogers is a voting member of the Tree Commission. So we already have some places in our charter where people are serving on boards or commissions that are identified in the charter and receiving some compensation. And the state law, in laying out the Zoning Enabling Act that requires you to have an administrative officer, actually, I won't use the word recommends, but identifies as a possible person to serve as the administrative officer is the chair of your planning board. So I'm not asking to break the rules here, but it already seems to me that we so I guess the question is, when do you become an employee versus you're receiving a stipend a la the Board of Canvassers?
I haven't been asked that question, but I think the answer is that the examples you reference are all either in your charter or people serving under the existing duties. So Rick Rogers, is essentially an ex officio member of the Tree Commission. It's specified and laid out that he serve in that role. It's not as if he was simply appointed because he applied. So I think that's the key difference. I don't think there's necessarily a dollar amount. I think it has more to do with the source of the authority. And I think in this case, there is a concern that since, although you're right, it makes perfect sense to have your planning board chair be your administrative officer. It's efficient and it makes sense. But I think when that becomes a compensated position in the nature of an employee, you're running afoul.
All right. One of the other issues, though, about losing any member of the planning board right now is the planning board is down to, and then there won't be, we'll have an administrative officer, but we won't have a planning board to be able to hear anything because we won't have a quorum. So it's...
I think
Can
we
I-
had a couple of those examples when I was reading the planning board where they have a,
Yeah,
I just have another, are you done, Tricia?
I am. I just wanted to ask
I
that.
just have another issue. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it doesn't look like anyone wants to talk about it, but I would just like to know why Ms. Gill handled it in this manner. Did you want to answer? Sure.
Hi, good evening. I was waiting to see if anybody was going to ask me for any input here. First of all, I'd just like to address you with some basic comments. When I was appointed 2 months ago, I was prepared to speak and make it clear that I was doing this short term, but you appointed me without even giving me the opportunity to speak. I was a little miffed by that, but I let that slide. I was willing to do this again. I wasn't willing to sacrifice my whole summer. We went through one round of an applicant who took another position. I spend a lot of hours in here. I've done a lot of work. Right now, I'm finding it very difficult to deal with the reality that if I spent 30 to 40 hours a week in here, I would be paid the equivalent of a lawyer who would spend 6 hours a week in here on site. That's a little tough to swallow. I know I'm not a lawyer, but I have been on the planning board for over 5 years, and I have the institutional knowledge that he does not. He would be serving conflict as administrative officer and the solicitor for the planning board and zoning board. Part of the difficulty I've had is that as chairman of the planning board and administrative officer, those are two very different roles that I have to deal with. And I think it's a real checks and balance. When I'm in the office as administrative officer, I'm advising applicants, guiding them, making suggestions, helping them through the process. But when I'm on the planning board, I'm acting on behalf of the town as a volunteer member of the public. So it's a fine line you have to walk, and I think for the short term, I was willing to do that. I think, again, for the long term, it's extremely difficult. When I did it for the 14 months previous, I was vice chair, so it was slightly different positions. Stu Hardy was chairman at that time. So, because one of the things you do as administrative officer, you review the plans and you certify them, and then the chairman of the planning board is the person that signs the plans for recording. And if you lose that checks and balance, things can slip through the cracks, or things can be done that shouldn't be done. And that's not the way I operate, but that's the risk that you take when you have somebody pointed in at both positions. I submitted the letter because I had gotten very frustrated with last month. So I had been thinking I would hang in there, but then once I realized, John informed me that the candidate that had been interviewed had taken another position. I saw again, I was at a point where this could go on for a long time. I submitted the letter to all the counselors and to Jan, and I was disappointed, I was frustrated, because I really wasn't contacted or addressed. 2 counselors contacted me, and I had acknowledgement from Jan, but nothing more than that initially. So I was mad, actually, that I reached out to everybody on the council and I got nothing back. So I'm like, I'm just being left out there. I will tell you very honestly, last month, and I let Attorney Fabish know I was mad. Basically, for a month where we had 2 solar project major land development that we had to approve, and all the other work, as you go through the administrative officer report, all the work that I had on my plate last month, he was on vacation almost the entire time and unreachable. He basically returned the day of the meeting. And I just was, I think partly that's what precipitated my resignation was I'm being put in a very difficult position and I'm getting no professional support. It was very difficult. So, I'm still, it depends on, Jan keeps asking me what I'm going to do, and it's like from one day to the next, what I'm going to do is different. I don't want to leave the town in a lurch, but I don't want to do this for another year. I have a hard time, like I said, that a lawyer will be paid $200 an hour, and I will be paid somewhere between $25 and $30 an hour for being on site, available to applicants. The things that you will miss are the planning department has the administrative officer in the queue for signing off on building permits. So with that, they're concerned because that's going to be a holdup. They aren't going to have people to sign off. We review every building plan that comes through. We look at it for if it's a recorded subdivision, if it's a lot of record, and if it needs an environmental review statement. And that's part of the process that goes through DPW, fire department, and all the other building, electrical, whatever the sign off. So they're concerned about that. We review every application that comes in. You have to certify it complete. Right now, there are 7 decisions that need to be written and recorded sitting on my desk that I've left for Attorney Fabish. That's a lot of hours. That's a lot of work. They're legal documents. Applicants have the right to appeal them, so they are significant. I'm not a lawyer. I've been mentoring and working with the new clerk in there. Of the 2 months she's been here, I've had her probably maybe 2.5 of the weeks. That was another frustration I had last month. The month that I was there in July, basically she staffed the building department. And so I had 2 meetings, very big meetings last month, and I was left without a clerk. So I was doing all of it for the most part. I mean, she did help maybe an hour a day. But it's once again, the planning department is at the very bottom rung of the ladder in this town in how things function. It's not totally intended, but I'm as you can tell, I'm very frustrated. That's part of what I did. I vented in my letter. The fact that nobody, I initially said, this is what I'll do it for this amount of money. And then after I got no response from that, I said, my price has gone up. Now I'm not even sure if I'll consider it. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you at this point. I know the town is required to have it. We went through this at the Charter Commission. It's required in state law. It's required in the subdivision regulations. You cannot function without an administrative officer. Right now, the planning board is a 6-member group. We're supposed to be 9. So if somebody's absent, somebody has to recuse. That's why we didn't have a quorum. We had 4 because 1 member was absent, and then on 2 applications, 2 different members had to recuse. So that's why we couldn't hear those applications. Mm-hmm. If I step off, then we're down to 5. So if anybody's absent, anybody recuses, then those petitions cannot be heard. And the other thing I'm dealing with is there's things I want to be working on as chairman of the planning board, such as the solar ordinance, the comp plan, some of the other things that you hear about, the sign ordinance. but it's like, but I'm here all day for 7 to 8 hours. I really don't have the energy to go home and do another 2 or 3 hours of planning board business and doing it all on a volunteer basis. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Susan. I'm sorry for your frustration. I just have to be honest. I know you were frustrated, but basically the way you did this kind of left us in the lurch. I mean, we didn't even have a chance to, because of the way the agenda works, we couldn't get it on the agenda because it's against the law to do anything that you wanted.
I emailed everybody the letter on the 19th. There was a town council meeting on the 22nd, which I attended. I waited till the very end. I was assuming that one of you up there would have brought it up under either a counselor item or a town administrator item, and nobody did. And so I left that night again.
Well, how can we bring it up when it's not on the agenda, though,
You guys
Susan?
bring up
Because we
things
can't
under
really go
counselor
into
items all the time.
any
It's
real
not
discussion.
specifically on the agenda.
Okay, well, I can speak a little
I'm
bit.
not-
Remember, this is a little complicated because you're in two
Yeah.
roles. So
Right.
as a department head, it's not appropriate for us to interfere. We have to rely on and through our town administrator. As a chair to chair, and you and I have spoken many times,
Right.
and I've certainly spoke with you when you took the role, and I not a doubt in my mind, this was always meant to be a temporary basis.
Right.
I do think the vice president did respond, looking for guidance on what your request was at this point in time.
Right.
But here we are, and I appreciate you bringing these forward candidly, and we're going to figure this out. I just need to be, it's a little complicated, because when we're talking about the
Right.
the chair to chair, this works without any restrictions. Everything else, I need to look at you on and ask for a recommendation.
And I'm glad to make a recommendation. Before I do, I just want to also acknowledge the frustration and that I can appreciate it. On the other hand, the circumstances that lead to this frustration are pretty much beyond anyone's control here. And I can come up with a long list of things that miff me, but I still have a duty to do certain things, and I'm doing it. And that doesn't take away from, we need to, take this request seriously and deal with it because it's only fair, basically. I think it's the right thing to do. Very little time to actually resolve situations that suddenly happen. Very little opportunity to fill the vacancies that we have in the building and zoning office, as well as the vacancies in the planning office. It's a lot easier to put all the problems on the table than to solve them. And to some extent, we need to hang together to get there. I have to say that. Having said that, I think the request is reasonable. I think it's key to consider that this is, by definition, a very, very temporary proposition, not something like permanent employment as a town employee. I think that's important to keep in mind. I think we owe that to Susan. I think we owe it to the town as well. This is not the perfect solution, so we don't want to perpetuate it any longer than we absolutely have to, and it's entirely up to her whether she wants to do it or not. We then have to decide, so what does this entail? There are a lot of hours involved, in particular because there is no planner. So, she gets to do, to some extent, the additional work, or some of the additional work that the planner does in addition to the administrative officer work. So my recommendation is that we look at, the proportion of the administrative officer's work of the overall position, and then look at the salary that has been budgeted in the past, the salary that has been budgeted in the current fiscal year. I will say that the salary that the allocation in the budget is for the department head, meaning the combination of zoning and planning. That's the way that was actually bumped up to a higher level, because someone who actually takes responsibility of managing both those parts of that office is supposed to have a somewhat higher salary. Anyway, I looked at what the salary was in last year's budget. I added the increase that could have happened with the planner at that time, and I added another 2%, as is happening with a lot of the department heads' positions, going from one fiscal year to another, or when they have an anniversary. And then I ended up basically with an hourly rate, and that would be my recommendation, of $33.35. And that does not yet take into consideration that, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about Susan doing this without getting benefits. It's just the straight pay. And typically, we pay people actually, a little extra if they don't get the benefit. So I think the 33 hours, 35, I don't know what she thinks about it. I haven't had a chance. I'm not sure I have any authority to discuss it with her. I've certainly suggested that we discuss, what would be a reasonable compensation. I think in the first instance, you might want to look at an hourly rate. And then, of course, the next question is, well, how many hours are we talking about?
I think it should be up, to the individual. For instance, they're just filling in.
And that's fine. And I think it would be, at this point, given all the business that's before the office, and Susan can comment on this, I think it's anywhere from, between 70 and 90% of the overall position, depending on any given week. But maybe Susan can comment on that.
Just again, so just because I asked this question much earlier, because I think I'm guessing we're going to find a solution here, and we're going to work out these details, but I'm wondering about rules of necessity, and I'm wondering about what happens to the planning board with these, have a recusal. The planning board could still go on, right, with 3 or 4?
It can technically go on, but I think you're putting, there is a very real risk that there are applicants who cannot get their applications heard, and that may, simply mean that a time clock ticks. There are implications to that. The issue of fully staffing or perhaps changing the number of seats on your planning board is something that the town really needs to address, like really before anything else. Not before this necessarily, but before ordinances, before, I see that with applicants since the day I came on being a real issue.
But this was before your time. The chair and vice chair of the Charter Review Commission, that was one of the recommendations that was made. And voters didn't get-
I think it's long overdue without
that
weighing
was
in on
solved
that,
last
but,
If I may,
So I'm sorry, I need to put you on the spot on a question, because it sounds like we may be in a position where we have to take a choice between not having AO or run the risk of a rule of necessity.
I don't think that's true.
You think we can maintain a quorum on all live cases
No,
before the
we
planning
can't.
board?
We
I think she
can't- we
can stay on
cannot-
the planning board.
We can't approve any subdivisions without a quorum of the full body, which is 9, so we need 5 voting members on any application, and there's one that would be on the agenda in September that we could not vote on.
Okay, so then the question is, we need a legal opinion that we can hold both positions on a temporary basis through some emergency power or something.
I would have to come back to you and answer that. I can't answer that right now. I don't know of any exception.
I'm sorry, back to you.
I'm sorry, and I think this could and should have been determined by now. To have to come back is, to me, unbelievable.
We'll make a decision now.
It needs to be decided, and my opinion is that Susan can be on the planning board. She may need to step down as chair of the planning board to avoid a more obvious possible conflict. I'm not even sure there is a necessary conflict here, as Councilor Hilton mentioned. But I think she can be on the board can still have a quorum. That doesn't take away from how precarious the situation is with the lack of, we don't have an adequate number of members.
So is the
that
conflict
needs to
only
be-
for elected officials? Is that the?
If we're looking at 1213, it's only for elected.
No, I think
some ways
it's in
buried
our, I
somewhere
think
else.
it's in our
No,
regulations.
it says that and there is a provision in the charter that says town employees may not serve on boards and commissions. That's why I was asking
Okay, so
earlier.
you won't be an employee.
At what point does Susan become an employee? What
She's
is the
not. She's a
difference between
contractor.
a stipend?
We can do a
That was the
temporary
question I was
contract.
trying to ask
Yeah,
at the beginning of this
And there's a 14-factor
discussion.
thing on the Department of Labor and the IRS, and believe it or not, even though we're obviously not employees, our stipends come in on W-2s. The rules are all over the map. I propose we appoint you as a consultant, an independent contractor. Clearly, it is the intent that it's interim, which is a key factor in the analysis. And you know what? I guess I'd rather have a complaint over that than having an applicant not get a fair hearing or to not have an administrative officer. Is that, before we take any kind of vote, is there like a working consensus?
Well, should we ask Susan if, I mean?
Well,
this
Well,
is-
that's my next
is-
question.
it-
Do we want to have that
is this
conversation now?
amenable
or
to
should you-
Susan?
Well, there's another consideration. You have to see if Stu Hardy's willing to assume chairmanship, one.
He's got no choice. We're going to make him.
Well, somebody
I
on the
mean, he
planning
can
board will
step
do
in,
it.
and I,
I'd just like to apologize to you for not reaching out to you, but I was under the impression that you had already made your decision and you were not coming back. That was it. That's why I wasn't going to try to persuade you into staying. I figured you had made up your mind. That's why I never contacted you. I don't think that we're being cheated in any way for the year and a half or 2 years that you've done this job. You've done an outstanding job, and I think you should be commended for that. And no matter what we pay, we're getting our money's worth. That's the way I feel.
And I agree. I'm not entirely comfortable having like detailed negotiation. Is there any way to delegate? I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't want to put, or do we really need to start talking about?
no, I want 48 hours to think about this further,
Okay.
because I've been really on the fence about which way I want to go with it, where my,
Okay,
I guess where
so
my
I want a way to
obligation
approve
is.
this in concept, subject to, can I do that?
I would do two things. I would authorize the administrator to negotiate the contract. I would affirm that this is a sole source contract, not subject to bidding, and within the range of, I wouldn't even put a range of terms, terms to be,
Something within the budget.
fitting within the budget, right?
Fitting within the
exactly,
budget,
right.
and it is the intent of the council that this is not a statutory employee, but this is a temporary independent contractor, consultant, basically. Therefore, it is not going to be an employee.
And I would suggest that the contract be crafted to specifically reference those points that, match up to non-employee status. And perhaps Labor Council could offer some advice on that. but-
have those agreements.
right.
Well, then
Yeah, I'm not
that's-
asking for benefits or health or anything, just, so.
So moved. So moved.
All right?
Wait. I think on this one, I'm going to need more detail, because honestly, I'm not quite comfortable approving in advance this particular move. I'd rather have a special meeting once the terms are negotiated. But that's why I need to know what we're actually voting on. The so moved didn't quite capture the details for me.
Let me attempt to explain the motion as I understand it, unless, Joe, if you want to. But the vote, as I understand the motion, would be an authorization to, if she chooses to accept, to, I guess, reappoint. Could this go retroactive? I guess it can't go retroactively.
Actually, that would be part of my recommendation, but I don't want to
Yeah.
complicate things.
Okay.
Well, I
We'll figure
think you
that
have to
out.
have an administrative officer in place consistently, so I think the retroactivity may gum up that.
So at such time as you may negotiate within the terms of the budget, subject to approval of the town administrator and legal counsel as an independent contractor, if she chooses to accept. And stressing that this is a temporary interim, and I think the minutes should reflect that, I don't know if I call it an emergency, but we certainly have extenuating circumstances which require this for the best interest of the town and the applicants, to try to conform with the law as best as we can. The specifics of the terms, I think we can delegate to management, and as long as it's within the budget. And I guess it's always like anything, could be open to renegotiation if it turns out to be even more work or less work, or if we want more time.
So,
How did I do on just attempting to explain what I think the live motion is, and then we can debate it a little more? Is
Yeah.
that- Okay, all right. Did you want to add
Be
anything
nice
more,
if
then
we
I'll
could.
let Tricia jump in? Okay.
Be nice if we could go
So-
back.
we're obviously in a pickle here. And I don't see that we have the funding to, and if there was someone else so that Susan could simply be the chair of the planning board, which I think she'd like to be, I'd be looking to that solution. But I don't think that we can afford to pay Mr. Fabish his hourly rate to do administrative officer work. I think that's just not feasible. But we have got to get a planner here. I mean, and if we have to have a special meeting to talk about why we cannot attract a qualified candidate, what do we need to do to get a candidate here? I mean, we had a planner who was here for a period of time. That didn't work out. So we haven't had a planner now. It's August. He left in May. I mean, this is it's a critical role. It's an important job. It's in addition to the administrative officer work, it's the community comprehensive plan work. It's all of that. If we're not getting any candidates, we need to have a serious discussion about why and what we do about it. I know the planning community's small. There aren't tons of them, but this is getting to be crazy. We need a competent, qualified planner. And the one thing I do worry a little bit about, and I understand that we need to compensate Susan, but if I just did the back of the envelope math in my head, right, what we'd be compensating Susan annualizes out to be about $60-something thousand a year, which I know Susan puts in a ton of work, but she's doing that that's what she's being compensated to be, the administrative officer, which in theory is only a portion of the planner's job. So, you know, we need to be fair to Susan, but at the same time, we also can't afford to burn through that salary account so that when we have a person, an applicant, that we have appropriate salary to pay them. So if whether we have a special meeting or we put it on the agenda for the next meeting as to why we are having such an incredibly difficult time getting planner candidates in here, we have to do something differently. This is crazy.
Okay, I think we've all had at least one opportunity. Does anybody from the public wish to be heard or help us crack the code here?
Can I just make the point? I don't want to, I'd like to make the point that, the ability of Mr. Fabish to step in on very short notice and jump into that role, I do understand that it is not a cost-efficient way to do it. What we did was we looked at what the budget is. We didn't want to dent the budget or leave it any worse off. We found a number of hours that would match that. But I also want to make very clear that the intent was to do this for the minimal amount of time possible, right? It is not either in the financial interest of the town or the sanity interest of Mr. Fabish to be juggling both of those things, but the town had a very immediate need. And it was our intent as your solicitor's office to give you a solution that it would at least get you through this discussion. And as Jan will affirm, this was a sort of week to week. We understood that as soon as it was solved, you'd have the option to go in whatever direction you choose to go in. So I just want to make sure everyone understood that. We were simply trying to provide you with a required solution that you did not have.
At my
in hand.
request.
I appreciate that. And again, I think, as was stated, the universe of land use has always been a challenge area, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but it's a challenge. We do have a live motion on the floor, and by the way, there's no assurance that after you take the time you would like to take, that you'll even have the solution. So I for one...
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure. Yeah.
Just to clarify Trish's point, paying me would not be a money drain on this. You've already banked the month of July and half the month of August because I haven't been paid. So you're already ahead. The thing is, if I accept whatever I'm paid at, I would step off as soon as a planner was hired. You wouldn't hire a planner and pay them and me, so the entire salary would then go. So you're going to end up ahead. You're not going to end up behind, no matter what you pay me.
Or potentially, perhaps, a different AO, even if we were waiting for a planner, for whatever reason. That is another possibility.
Right. We tried that before.
I'm just saying,
I know, we went down
if some
that.
other volunteer were to show up, if you're thinking of running for, or volunteering for the planning board, we'd love to have you if you'd like to.
Right.
Well, we may have to have a special meeting about that, too.
Yeah. But I just wanted to
I
use
have no
people's
problem
attention
calling a
that
special meeting.
that's not a money drain.
I'd love for this process to continue. Floor's open. What's your pleasure?
Well, I'm not quite sure. What did you want to do, Trish? You were saying that,
I think Justin's looking for more detail. Tricia's speaking to the larger structural problem, I think, of just staffing the office.
well, what were we talking about?
Well, we made a
What we wanted
motion
to
that
pay her.
Geo, we went along with what Geo had said about drawing up something as a contractor. And Donnie, you seconded it.
Yeah,
And then he was going to look into it to see if we can actually do that.
Yeah.
And we do that. She has 48 hours to give us an answer, and then we go from there.
I mean, I think whatever the
And then-
result of the contract is, you should come back at your next meeting and ratify.
And
that.
ratify it. Yes,
And so
that's what Justin
the-
said.
The contract would only be valid up and, it would sort of self-terminate at the point of ratification until it became permanent, or at least became ratified.
Right.
So you would have an opportunity to come back and apply your oversight to the contract negotiation.
Right, so as I understood it, we made a motion for you to look into doing this, and then come back to us, like Justin said, to ratify it or...
And I think that could be the next regular meeting. I don't think you need to call a special meeting in order to do that ratification. I think you can start with Susan under that contract, given the emergency nature. And as long as you take it up as in the course of your next regular agenda.
So she would be compensated until our next regular meeting, so we could ratify...
She and John can come to
Okay.
terms, I think
Okay.
that's fine, just given the nature, right? You really have, you are at jeopardy
Right.
of legal, serious legal consequences if you don't solve this problem. I'm not one to throw out emergency or exceptions to hiring or purchasing rules. I think this comes square.
Yeah, this would be just like when we had to purchase a rescue, the emergency situation would be basically the same thing?
I think this is even
probably even
more applicable,
Right.
and I think it's but again, you have to run the traps even of the emergency hiring
Yep.
rule, and I think at some point you've got to come back at some first available point, you have to come back and ratify it and make the decision.
Let me suggest this, we're also down 2 counselors tonight, so it might make sense if I can persuade Mr., let's let this process go, and then when we have the whole team back here, we can take another look at it if we don't like the details. Is that?
Okay, but in the meantime,
So-
if Susan decides to do this,
Right.
we're going to put her on board until...
Right, I
Okay,
support,
okay.
I support the motion, I'm fine having a special meeting, but I think we would benefit from having
A regular
all
meeting.
7 of us as well, so
Right.
I'd have to think. But I don't know, Justin, do you want to speak more to?
Well, my only concern was the administrator put out a dollar amount, and then the administrative officer will work as many hours as he or she wants. I mean, it's just a very open-ended thing to approve in advance. That was my only concern
Okay.
with that.
And I think Council Hilton spoke to, there's a certain budget that we will.
Well, I think you
But-
commit not to exceed.
But I'd go back to what I said before. I would go back to what I said before.
Absolutely
She's
not to
been,
exceed or not.
she's done this. I'd go back to what I said before. She's done this for over a year for nothing. So, even if we are doing something that,
And again, it would just
We'll
be
give
for a
it-
period of a couple weeks.
she's well deserving of.
When I say a period of a couple weeks, I mean a period of a couple weeks until we see the full contract.
Right.
Although, back to the hours thing again, and Susan is extraordinarily a diligent worker. But, when you say up to 40, that worries me. And it worries me because, Susan has a lot of responsibilities on the planning board, and then to say the administrative officer position is going to be a 40-hour-a-week job. Sometimes it's busier than others, but it shouldn't. I mean, in theory, if and when we have a planner, the administrative officer duties will be part of the planner's job. It's not the planner's full-time job. So turning the administrative officer position into a 40-hour-a-week position worries me, and it worries me because I don't think that is, I don't think it's fair to ask Susan to do that much work. I think if she's going to do this for us temporarily, she should have the right to say, these are administrative officer duties and I'm responsible for them, so I will do them. But the other stuff that really belongs as part of the planning job, she shouldn't feel compelled to do it. We shouldn't ask her to be doing it. We should be, trying to get through this period with the administrative officer duties being done correctly. So I do worry a little bit about
When I
the creepiness to
When I mentioned the not to exceed 40, it was really just for the budgetary purposes, so that you don't end up in a position where you're spending more than your allocation. I can tell you, having looked at this with Attorney Fabish and Jan over the last 2 weeks, I think it is about 6 to 8, maybe 10 hours of AO work in a normal week.
God bless you.
But some weeks more than
making the
others,
point that
depending.
we're not in a normal period right now because of all the catch-up that needs to be done.
We're paying $1,200 for two days' work. She could work 40 hours a week at $30 an hour, and it would still be saving money.
I have a lot of confidence in the planning board and
Yeah,
Susan and the administrator that this will not be.
Yeah, I don't think
The
it's.
key
I
is
don't
to
think
make
it's
sure
an
that we
issue.
can delegate this
Really.
matter so that we can solve the problem tonight.
Pay $1,200 for 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out what Tricia's trying to get at. Do you want her to work just 20 hours? I'm just trying to figure
No,
out what your point is.
I'm not trying to set a limit. I'm trying to make the point that, that the administrative officer job is not meant to be a 40-hour-a-week full-time job. So, and at the same time, to be fair to Susan and her staying on the planning board, that, this agreement should specify that Susan should be doing, if she agrees to do this, the administrative officer duties. Those are the things that a planner should be doing that we don't have right now. We shouldn't be asking her to do, expecting her to do. They're going to have to sit until we get a planner. But again, it doesn't have to be a special meeting. At some point, I would like to have a discussion about what is it we need to do differently in order to attract a qualified, competent planning candidate. Because it's clearly, whatever we're doing right now, it's not working.
So let's.
Okay, so I think Justin has got our list going of schedules and priorities, and so we'll make sure that's on the scheduling tracker. And
What I'm getting from Tricia, and I do understand that it's dual role, the planner and the AO, but there'll be no one in the office. Well, no, we got the clerk in there, right? We still have the clerk. Okay.
we should remember too, the town has
Yeah.
not had a planner at all.
Right.
Until in the
And
hundreds of years of Tiverton,
we
I think the
can't
AO
ask-
role is a lot more important than the planner role, with all due respect to the.
Well,
our
yeah,
planner
it's
positions.
required by state, and also the planner also is supposed to have certain degrees, which Susan doesn't have and shouldn't be required to do that work, and I have to agree with Tricia on that. If that's the case, she's just doing the AO position, then I don't think it's required to do 40 hours, and she shouldn't have to, give up her whole life just to fill in for a short time. So, maybe it should be less than 40 hours, because it wasn't at 40 hours.
I don't think we should put a number on it. I think we should just leave that up to her.
Yeah.
Not put a number of hours.
And-
Yeah.
We'll leave it up to
Yeah.
the administrator and
As
Susan to
needed.
figure it out.
Maybe one week it might be 28
Maybe
hours,
20
another week it might be.
25
you
hours,
never-
30 hours, whatever.
Okay, so can I make this suggestion, if and when you're able to work this out, please circulate it through the clerk to the whole council as usual. If somebody just sees something very, very pressing that can't wait, we can always call a special meeting once we see that they've come to meeting of the mind.
Yep.
Does that work? And then we'll schedule.
So we'll move the motion?
Do we have a second?
We do have a live
Yes,
motion
Don,
and a
second.
second. This is a good debate. I wanted to make sure, does anybody from the public wish to be heard on any of this? All right. Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Okay. Okay, we have a live motion and a second. We'll now call for the vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. I'd like to again thank Ms. Gill for bringing these concerns to our attention, and juggling these multiple hats does lead to some tricky procedure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Next is the item that was the subject of a workshop that council had on July 29th, which is what we're doing after the landfill is closed, which will happen sometime next year. We have had the presentation, and my recommendation is that we're not going to have it again, because it would take up a lot of time unless there are urgent clarifying questions, which still can be answered, down the line. But my main recommendation is that the council, if at all possible, try to reach some very key decisions that we need as staff and as consultants to be able to proceed in the very short period of time that we have to get ready for that landfill closure. In particular, deciding what kind of a contract we're going to have for the pickup and transport and ultimate disposal of the municipal solid waste, and to what extent the council wants to proceed with or continue with the service that is currently provided, allowing residents to drop off difficult to recycle waste. The current curbside program is for both trash and the regular recyclables. And so I've outlined the decisions and underlined them and bolded them as much as I could to indicate where I think the decision needs to happen. And I've made a recommendation as well as to what I think that decision could be. Obviously, it's up to the council to do that. But my request is that we focus on those specific recommendations. And then to the extent there needs to be further discussion, for example, of where are we with, have we identified any additional sites, potential sites? We can go into that as well. We have some visuals for that if necessary, but I think the focus needs to be on these particular decisions.
Okay, thank you, Jan. So again, the council held a workshop focused just on this issue last week, and this is trying to address the issue which we've seen coming for many, many years, which is the imminent closure of our landfill. And the recommendation of the town administrator, in rough terms, is to continue the program of collecting and transport by private contractor of both waste and recyclables, but now having direct haul to Johnston, continuing in the pay-as-you-throw program, and at least, I guess, continuing to consider but not immediately act upon a local transfer station. And those are the sort of the biggest highlights. And again, I don't think it's efficient or appropriate to redo the entire workshop here. So I'd like to really start off by a debate of this proposal, which is a recommendation of our town administrator. And the floor is open.
May I say something? I spent quite a bit of time today trying to get my head around this report. I also did call Tim. I had a lot of questions, and I ended up putting everything down so that I could understand it. The total solid waste annual cost, the current program was $1.46 million. That includes the Pay It program, which is projected to be in the Pay It restricted fund at the time of closure. I had a question of continuing, and I talked to Tim that we have a shortfall in that account. I think it's $9 to $10 million for closure, and I don't have the treasurer here, but I think it's like $8 million in there. Do you
about.
know? Yeah, okay. So we have a shortfall. So I said I had a question of continuing this program due to the shortfall on closure money needed to close the landfill. Keep the Pay-T program for 1 to 2 years until the full amount needed for closure is reached. Also, if council wanted to, close the account or reallocate the trash program where you might feel it might want to go, or just not have it at all. Landfill allows all levels of service. Yard waste is included in the $200,000, which is $70,000 with Mega. The program's supposed to close in November of 2020. Then I did I called them by colors, and the next one was the blue program in the folder, and that's the direct haul program, $1.55 million. Mega to take care of everything but add a truck due to the runs to the Rhode Island Resource Center. Miscellaneous material handling at curbside includes $70,000 for yard waste in the $200,000 estimate. Yard waste needs to be addressed, where to drop it off, pick a site. Will site add more money to the program? Because we might have to buy the site. Cost difference from current program to the Blue Crow program is $90,000 more. If the pay-T contribution continues, the cost, that has to be figured in. So that costs $425,000 a year, which of course is almost like a revenue, but it goes into a special restricted fund. But since that's being, as I want to ask this afternoon, why that was added in, it is added in, it is a cost of waste even from the people. So whether it's taxes or whether you're using your own revenue to buy it, it was $425,000 plus the $90,000 equals $515,000, and then added to the $155 million is $2,065,000. So it's going to affect our taxes, no doubt about it. Then the transfer station. Mega for curbside pickup, and then miscellaneous material handling is $75,000 extra charge, but included in the cost. I'm still a little wonky on that, and I think Tim might help me out on that. Capital expense you have right away, and you will need a RL and DEM license. And I think there's some other things you have to get. Cost of the transfer station equals $2.5 million, 20-year bond at 2.5%, more debt. I think we have enough debt, and I think that was a bone of contention during the casino, that we wanted to pay off our debt, but people just didn't understand that with bonds, you really can only touch them at 10 years, and then you can redo the bond. After that, you can't touch them. You'll have to pay some type of fee or fine or something. So having said that, do we really want to go into debt? And then you'll never recover the cost. And if you change your mind, it's difficult to get out of it, because now you've put all this money into a transfer station and you might find you don't like it. The cost difference from the current program to the, I call it the orange program or the transfer program, is $120,000. Now, you have to have the pay program for 1 or 2 years, even with that, because you have to make up the cost of the landfill shortage. So you have the $425,000 plus the $120,000 equals $545,000, added to the $1.58 million equals $2,125,000. Then we have the total, the direct haul with recycling center, which is $1.58 million. Mega curbside pickup, capital expense right away. Recycling center takes 9 to 10 months to build. If you change your mind, difficult to get out of, because you have the cost of the recycling center is $500,000, 20-year bond at 2.5%. Possible cost of a site not added in, or an estimate for that. You'd have to have some place to put. Need for compact area, I sort of had that written somewhere, and you don't need a DEM license. It's not required documentation for the recycling center. Again, you're going to have the pay contribution of $425,000 for at least 1 to 2 years, plus the of course, it comes out, it's different, but it comes out at the same cost as the transfer station. And I don't know how, what we're going to do about grass clippings and that sort of thing. Again, we'd have to find some place to put that. Anyway, there it is. Huh?
Do you support the recommendation?
What, this?
Beyond?
Oh, yeah, the direct haul, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I just want, couple of things maybe, that the way the recommendation is structured, that it deals with some of the issues that Donna has raised, including it can be difficult to get out a certain commitment and it can be costly. So therefore, the suggestion is not to go with the big transfer station at this point in time. Whereas if you go with a small recycling center, you still have an option to go there later on. And you see that repeated in this proposal. Go with the one that's relatively easy to do now and affordable, and reserve the opportunity to change if the experience shows that, we really should be looking for a different solution. That's one. With respect to the pay-as-you-throw program, it is a confusing concept to some extent. We had tried to figure out how this works either as a cost or as a revenue. It's both, essentially, because the residents pay for the bags, and therefore...
It's revenue, but it's still a cost.
It is also a cost in terms of how much does it cost. We figured it in as a cost to cover what needs to be done in this program. It is true that until the landfill is actually closed, and perhaps for some period, smaller period after, that money still goes to dealing with the landfill cost, the closure cost, et cetera, et cetera. So there is some period of time where we don't really have a choice, need to continue with that program.
Sure.
My strong recommendation is that you don't even think about stopping the
Right.
program.
That's what
That you continue the program because it has not only the benefit that it brings in that revenue, but it helps make sure that we don't send more waste to the landfill than we absolutely have to. That is the beauty, if you will, of that particular program. And it's one of the most successful ways to encourage recycling, to reduce the amount of waste that we generate, and reduce the amount of waste we send to the landfill. So in my personal opinion, it's a no-brainer. Should be continuing with that because it's a demonstrated successful program. And with respect to yard waste, I think that's one of the toughest parts of this whole situation right now. I do think it's very important that we gauge as quickly as possible whether there's private sector interest in taking the yard waste off our hands, and that can be done in a variety of ways. There can be people who use it for a composting operation they already have somewhere, and they take it from us, or by them operating something for us. But in the first instance, I think we need to find out whether there might be private sector interest. And I think the other important piece is here, in order to ultimately finalize the decision as to whether we have the recycling center and exactly what that recycling center is going to accept, we do need to talk with Mega and perhaps even with some of their competitors and say, what scope of curbside pickup can you provide? So if you were to add mattresses, or if you were to add electronic waste, or whatever it may be, some of those difficult categories, what would that mean? What is the associated cost? We have to do that very quickly. So that's why that asks for, that authorization to at least have those discussions. And I don't know what the best way is to proceed, and I don't want to jump in for you, but maybe it's just item 1 first. That's sort of one major concept. Item 2 is the other major concept. Maybe we can take those one at a time.
So just to be clear, the proposal here is, sort of a green light on what we think is a working solution to a very tough problem, which is to not do a local transfer station at this time, but with a view towards a local recycling center, a smaller facility, and continue with direct haul. And I guess the question on the table is, anybody opposed to that, or would you like to see modification to that concept so that we can?
That's fine. I just think we should stay with pay-as-you-throw forever, because it alleviates problems of people just bringing trash in from other towns, leaving it, and then we're picking it up and hauling it out. At least this way, they're going to have to buy a bag, and we're getting some revenue from that. And whether that be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, whatever, just continue that pay-as-you-throw.
But it's not really revenue. It's
Well-
a tax.
Well,
It's a tax.
So, at such time
Well,
as the
it's-
revenue isn't needed, we can lower the tax dollars that pay for the program and keep the bags going. And then it's more of a user fee.
We're doing it for a reason right now, but
Yeah.
once the reason is gone, and I know what you're saying, we need to figure out what's fair to
Once-
everybody.
Once
because
the
you can-
reason's gone, though,
You can call it pay as you throw, but it is a tax.
well, then you'll be picking up trash from other
No.
people out of town, bringing their
Right.
trash, leaving it on the curb.
Well,
And
if
we'll
I
be-
can
we'll be
interject,
hauling
we
it
don't
away.
really need to decide that tonight because we don't really
But
have a choice at this
it's
moment.
just-
And
we
the other
just-
point is, as I just said, if it is a tax, but what that means is when the revenue is no longer needed for the particular program that it was set up for, you can reduce the actual tax that we pay out of our property taxes, if that's the way we want to go, and keep the bags in place.
Right.
And we get
Yeah.
both the tax reduction of, for the cost and the bags. My only, I guess, tweak or shift of emphasis from the administrator's suggestion here is I'd very much like to reduce the amount of the recycling center. So with an emphasis, as Tim presented it last week, and I'm not saying this is ideal, but from what the options were, it sounds as if there's a possibility the curbside pickup company could, by appointment, pick up mattresses, white goods, that sort of thing. And if that's a workable program, I mean, my number one priority is not to reduce services. So if it's possible to, and maybe even it would make it easier, I'd rather have a week, let a fridge sit in my front lawn for a week and not have to bring it to the dump myself. But if we can work that out with a private entity taking the yard waste, we really would need the recycle center. And so if we could, as we figure this out, if we could limit the amount of a recycling center we need, if we need to go up to the full $500,000 thing, then we need to, but that would be the direction I'd want to go if I had my say. And just as a last point, I'd rather just throw it out there so it can start to germinate in people's minds, rather than borrow $500,000. I think we could probably put it on a next FTR budget and just pay it outright. That way we'd get rid of those costs.
On the, and I agree, it's important to certainly explore, what additional scope the curbside pickup program can have. With that comes the question, how much more expensive is that going to be? And how do we pay for that? Also, I think, I may be wrong, but if we're thinking about the recycling center, there's a certain amount of volume or activity that is not profitable, but is worth it to have a station for. If you end up with one category, it may not be worth it. So then what do you do with that category? So I think you reach a certain point where it is like, well, now it's no longer feasible to actually have a recycling center just for that small category of recyclable. And I think it just needs to be, it's a trade-off, ultimately, that we can only make a decision on once we have better information from the contractor.
Precisely, that's exactly where I was going. I mean, I was thinking in terms of, if you look at the different options, with the idea that it was $32,000 of debt service to build the recycle center. If the contractor said, oh, it'll only be $32,000 for us to also pick up white goods and that kind of thing,
Right.
then you might as well go that way as a cost thing. But I wouldn't want to take that option off the table. That was my only point.
So does the wording, Justin, of this, and I think the administrator's done a really nice job putting this memo in front of us. I almost think you've written the motion here. Would you suggest sliding something in right before 2A to add further emphasis before we go to the town operated recycling center, or are we kind of covered by point 3, which already speaks to various level of service options for curbside pickup? Just want to make sure it has the emphasis that I think we may have consensus on. Or is this understood? I don't know, complicated. But I know you're looking for very
I think
clear
it's
guidance
understood, but
on
I
tough
can also
decisions, so-
understand why you might want to explicitly say, when we think about number 3, we really want us to affirmatively pursue, whether a broader scoped pickup program can cover this, and whether that would be cost efficient compared to having our own recycling center. And just make it like, that we're not just doing that to go through the motions, we're really pursuing that as, if you all agree that that is your preferred solution, then at least we can take that as a direction.
Let's make sure, let's see if Tricia has any comments.
I mean, I'd like to see the cost for both, absolutely I would. The only The only concern that I would have about the curbside pickup, or not concern, but I'd like to know is, pricing wise, do they offer it once a month? Can you call by appointment? That might cost more than they have a once a month pickup. The one thing that I hope not to see at the end of this, if we did go with curbside, is a situation where, because we have a fair number of rental properties in parts of Tiverton that, there's a whole bunch of abandoned furniture and refrigerators on the curb for 3 weeks before it gets picked up. So I'd be curious to know not just the price, but the scheduling of it.
And we've already talked with the consultants about that, and I think we know that different contractors do things a different way, and so we would want to find out, certainly from this contractor, since we still have a year to go with that contract, how it would approach that, like certain days of the week, every week, or only a couple of weeks, or once a month. We don't know that yet, but I think there's a bunch of scenarios that need to be worked out with them.
Anybody from the public? This is one of these tough decisions. We'll take all the input you can give us. Ms. Pelletier?
Barbara Pelletier. I'm wondering, how much per household a year do we spend, or a month do we spend on the trash pickup? I mean, do we know how much it costs per household, per living unit, or whatever you want to call it, more or less?
Just everything in round numbers, but if you made it 1.4 million, you pick up about 7,000 spots, it comes out to about $4 a week per household. And it's hard to get somebody to pick up your trash and recycle for $4 a week.
Right. Well, because I got very angry at the purple bags when they came out because they kept breaking. So we opted for Patriot pickup, and that's about $40 a month. But there's an awful lot that you can squeeze into that bin that if they pick up every week. They pick it up Tuesday, no matter if there's a holiday or what. They pick up very regularly at 8:30, the bin, and
One bin?
it's one big trash barrel.
Is it $40 for one bin, or is it
$40
$40 a month for as many?
It's $40 a month for the one bin.
Okay, so if you had two, it'd be 80?
Yeah, but I mean, you can't possibly, and I'm a very trashy person, I have a hard,
There are some families, I see 6 and 8 bags out on in
yeah.
front of their house.
Oh, you can easily, I mean, you can squeeze an awful lot into that bin, and the machine comes and picks it up and dumps it and goes away. So, for people who don't want to buy bags or whatever, it's an option.
Yeah, I just, the pay-as-you-throw, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. When we first passed that, I think I was the only one that was opposed to it, because I wanted the first bag to be free. So I am all about revisiting that program once the landfill is truly closed and capped. But I don't know if there's anything we can do, at least until the landfill is closed and capped, and then we can really explore whether, do we need the program? Can we do more, free days? Can we expand the low-income program to it? We can talk really technically about how when you pay for the bag, you can't deduct it on your taxes, but if it's part of property taxes, you can. And I mean, but I don't think we can disturb that program at least until the landfill is capped, right? Is that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Jan would never cancel it.
Absolutely.
So I just want to try to find an agreement where we have.
I would just suggest that if you want to revisit it, we ought to have collectively, commitment to take the Municipal Solid Waste Management Course 101, because we need to get some principles through our head here. The cost of waste disposal is only going up. And if we don't do whatever we can to reduce that waste stream, we're fools.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, and I think we're pretty close to a motion here. So should we say after 2A, at a town-operated recycling center, to the extent contractor curbside pickup is not reasonably available or feasible, or are you happy with the language that you have there?
Well, I think you could more efficiently say to continue to accommodate drop-off by residents or pickup by the contractor of hard recycled materials, with A being with a private contractor accepting yard waste, and B, or at a town-operated recycling center as needed. No,
Okay.
I mean, it all goes the same place with the.
No, yeah, okay.
Just the emphasis being, let's see if the numbers and services make sense to just
Okay.
get off as much of it off of our backs as possible.
Because I think the goal here is to put us on the hot seat to make a decision that you can.
So it's
you can
2
move
or
with.
3, is that what you're sort of saying? Or
What's that?
3 becomes, you want to collapse 2 and 3, or?
Let's use your wording.
Well, I only changed 2, so that it would be drop off by residents or pick up by a contractor, and also the private contractor accepting yard waste or a town operating recycling center as needed. So I wouldn't touch 3 necessarily. Discuss the current. I mean, that is part of it.
Part of the wording.
I think the as needed is the key.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the as needed. If there's an or, why do we need an as needed?
Well, the idea is you might end up with the pickup company taking everything except yard waste. And then we would look to a private business to see if they wanted the yard waste. If they didn't, as needed, we would have to have somewhere for people to bring it so as not to reduce services. Because yard waste is one thing I think it is valuable for people to have somewhere to bring it because it can accumulate on the property. That's, I mean, I think, I don't know that we need to wordsmith this to perfection because, which really we're giving instruction here to Jan and Depart Engineering.
Exactly, that's why I'm not sure we
Okay.
need the as needed
are we
part.
happy with the
Just
language
sort of
as-
like, you know,
Yes,
As shown?
yes.
Or do you want to add any tweaks?
Well, in that case, if we could just put or pick up by the contractor, number 2, drop off by residents or pick up by the contractor of hard to recycle materials.
Okay.
It just, that adds that little bit of emphasis that I'm.
All right.
But as needed, the administrator and the engineer can review the video of this meeting to refresh our memories as to what the intention was.
Well, I think they've asked and they deserve a clear decision from us, whether. So does that give you the guidance you're looking for? Anything from, did we miss anything major? We want to make sure that we.
No, it was a good synopsis
Okay.
of what we've done, and this is good. This is good direction for us to move forward.
All right, thank you for your support. All right, was that a motion, Mr. Katz?
Sure.
All right, we have a motion with that, adding basically the language from this memo, which was very well done, adding just a little emphasizing words of or pickup by contractor to the lead into 2. May I have a second to that
Second.
motion?
I'll second.
We do have a live motion. Last call for any questions, comments, how to handle the closing landfill. We're getting there. Okay. Since what, 1952?
252.
Can't do that math anymore. 67 years? Is that something like that? 60, 70 years?
67 years.
Oh. Maybe someday we'll put a solar panel farm on it? No? Okay, any objection to proceeding to a vote? Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Again, recycling committee's worked on, a lot of people have worked on this. I know there's a lot more work to be done. It's a tough decision. I just want to make sure it's said that we all appreciate everybody's efforts on that.
Can I mention one other aspect of this? And I know now it's an or thing, not necessarily we're going with a recycling center, but in order to do some further planning, we need to, I think, continue to look at what are potential sites, not that we're committed to doing that. We've made some additional progress with that. I think there's a fairly big decision point coming up, whether the council is willing to consider a site in the industrial park. And we have new pictures. If you want to take a quick look at them, we can show them, because we have looked at, which parcels in the industrial park are, in fact, potentially good sites for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons is that in every case, you could fairly easily expand if you had to do the yard waste, for example, or had to use an area. So it's up to you if you want to take the time. I think it will take maybe 10 minutes just to show it. And, you know, there may need I don't know if you can make a decision tonight, because it's a bigger decision as to, oh, definitely, you know, you can go ahead and explore these sites or start making arrangements. But at least you have an idea of what is being considered. What's your preference?
I like pictures.
Sure.
Should've stayed there. Should've stayed there. Good.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Tim Thies, power engineer. Mark, I forgot your last name.
Weller.
Veller, Mark Veller, power engineer.
You gotta shut off the lights? You have to shut off the lights? Yeah.
It's coming.
Lights, action, camera. There you go.
Yeah.
So just a quick overview. So last meeting, we went over 4 sites. One of them was in the industrial park. And if you remember, 3 of the sites, the 3 that were outside the industrial park, loaded with wetlands, water courses, a lot of constraints on those 3 sites that were outside the industrial park. The industrial park site that we looked at, here's just an overview of the industrial park. The industrial park site that we looked at last week was this parcel right here, sort of this bean-shaped parcel. It's high and dry, not a lot of constraints, but it was sort of an awkward shape to make work. So actually somebody from the public actually suggested that we maybe look at consolidating a couple of the parcels up there and maybe reconfiguring it to get some more usable space out of that. So one of the things we did over the last 2 weeks is we looked at consolidating this site with these 2 parcels down here and then splitting them down the middle. So essentially taking 3 parcels and making them 2, combining them and making them 2. And then using this front parcel as a site for a recycling center or some future operation. So that's one site that we looked at. We also looked at a couple of other areas in the industrial park. We looked at sites that were along Progress Road, and we looked at those sites because, frankly, there's no other streets built in the industrial park yet. So if we were to look at any of the parcels that didn't have frontage on Progress, like say one of these parcels back here, we would have to build more infrastructure to get to that site. So we ruled out basically anything that doesn't have frontage on a built road. So that leaves us with just a handful of sites along Progress. Some of these sites over here, they're decent looking sites, but they abut an existing use, the new lawn complex that's there. So we thought we might want to stay away from an existing use right now. So we focused on some of these sites right here. And these parcels, they're kind of small, they're about 1 acre in size each. You could, if you had a small recycling center, you could look at maybe just one of these parcels. But if you wanted to expand into a larger recycling or maybe a compost site or a large yard waste site, you could annex some of the parcels near it. So for example, we looked at maybe combining these 3 parcels into one site. And we also looked at combining these 3 parcels into one site. And I will show you what those look like. So this is the site that we had presented 2 weeks ago, but we have now combined and sort of re-subdivided. So this originally was just this parcel here with 2 additional parcels down here. So we were looking at just this parcel. We consolidated these 3 parcels and then we split them down the middle, and we're proposing just this front parcel here. And that gives us more land to work with. It's about the same size in terms of gross area as the original parcel we were looking at, but because it's a more regular shape, it gives us actually more usable land on that same size parcel, if you will. Not a lot of constraints up here in terms of wetlands. You got some wetlands over here, you have some wetlands over here, but the site itself is high and dry. There's some topography that we would have to work with. We'd have to maybe cut back some grades to make a level site, but this could be a usable site. So this is one of the new sites on Progress Way that we looked at. So this is three parcels that we looked at consolidating. Like I said, if we had a small recycling center, we could potentially squeeze it on one of these parcels. These parcels are about an acre each. But realistically, to do anything sort of meaningful with the space that we would need, we would want to consolidate at least 2 of these parcels, maybe 3. And if we decided in the future we wanted to do a really expansive program, a large compost site or a really aggressive yard waste program, we could conceivably annex some of these other parcels in the back. We could take over some of these. The challenge to this one, well, this one is also high and dry. It doesn't have any wetlands around it. So in that sense, there's not a lot of constraints. It does have some topography issues. There is a big steep slope right here. There's kind of a knob right in the middle of the site. So we'd have to look at how we manage the site with that elevation difference from one end to the other. And this may actually lend itself to a different configuration, depending on what we do, maybe a 2-tiered recycling area, kind of like what the town of Barrington has now, where they have all the bins on a lower level. Everybody drops off their stuff on the upper level, pushes it into the bins down below. A site like this might lend itself to something like that. So this is one of the sites in the industrial park we looked at. And then this is the other one. This is actually just across this. There's a paper street that separates this site from the one we were just looking at. So this is a good site in the sense of constraints. There's not a lot of wetlands. It's not a wet site. It's high and dry. It does have some elevation change from one end to the other, but it's much more manageable than the other site. It's relatively flat, and the pitch is sort of uniform. Plenty of frontage on Progress Way. Again, these sites. This is 3 parcels combined. Again, the individual parcels about an acre each, so we combined 3 of them to give us a little bit more space, but we could maybe work something on just 2 parcels or possibly even just 1 parcel if we wanted to. But again, there's parcels near it where if we wanted to do something really big, we could expand to some of these other parcels if we wanted to. So that's just a sort of a quick overview of these other sites that we looked at and how we reworked one of the sites that we looked at 2 weeks ago. Questions on?
So if I understand, what we really want to make sure is that the team here, if we're going to, we don't want to waste their time looking at more sites on the industrial park if we think there's going to be a major objection to that from the council. So I don't know if you need a formal vote, but you want to hear from us sooner than later, right? If we're saying don't pursue these sites or any of these options, right? So I don't know how much you want to talk about that now, but I think it should almost silence means consent type of thing, or okay.
I do have one question. The site on the corner of Industrial and Progress, and we walked that a while ago. One of the questions was, based on the topography, does it look like you could have access to that site from Industrial Way?
I think that might be tough. I mean, you could make it work if you cut in a road, but you would have to cut that road back, and I think that would be an expensive earthwork project. I mean, nothing's impossible, right? We could make the grading work, but we would have to knock down some of those grades because it is a little steep coming from from the Industrial Way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because the less traffic you got going in the other way would be better.
This area here, you can see the contours here are these light lines.
Right.
It's a little bit flatter on Progress Way coming up through here. These contours are very close together. It's a little bit steep, particularly right here on this corner.
Right.
Not that you would enter at the corner, but it's very steep right here. It's very steep right here. It flattens out a little bit in the middle, but I think it's probably easier to make access work for Progress Way.
So when you say steep, where it says Industrial Way,
Yep.
going in there would be an uphill grade?
Correct.
Something like the one that goes into the landfill now? A steep upgrade like that? Because there is you go into the landfill on an upgrade.
You do. This
Right
is actually,
now.
You're correct, you do. This is actually a little bit steeper than what's
Okay.
out there now. And again, we could look at knocking that down, through some earthwork, but it's an expense that we would have to look at.
Okay, I think the sense of the council is you're hearing no objection to continue looking at the industrial park. Obviously, every site is important, and maybe we need to look closely at other impact on adjacent lots as well.
One question, is this area larger than the other two that you showed us?
This is a larger site. It doesn't have quite as much usable area. This is about 2.5 acres
All right,
of
so-
usable area.
Right, doesn't have as much usable area as the other two do?
It's in the same ballpark.
Okay,
Yeah.
because it seems to be bigger when you look at it.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably the scale of the drawing,
Okay.
but they're all about the same.
Where's the Public Works? I'm trying to,
So
To
Public
the left.
Works, yeah, it would be.
To the
would
left
be
there, in that
off the
area.
screen to the left.
Yep.
Let's say maybe a quarter of a mile down Industrial Way.
Okay. All right.
It's too bad, but it's too bad because the lot that's in between the DPW lot and that, where you see that green.
Is wet.
It's all wet.
Wet,
Like,
yeah.
that would be the ideal place to put it.
It would be, yes.
But it's soaking wet.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. But it's actually camera.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more item from the administrator on his run of 5 for action here, and then we'll move on to updates and announcements.
Thank you. The last one is a request approval to accept a grant that actually is going to the Newport County Prevention Coalition, and Rebecca Elwell is here. They successfully applied for a grant from the Van Buren Foundation, $125,000 grant, but they need essentially a fiscal agent as a conduit for the funding. We have done fiscal agent, that role before. We've worked with the Newport County Prevention Coalition on several cases where it has worked. In this case, the Van Buren Foundation chose to designate the town as the actual recipient rather than just the fiscal agent. And that gave me a little pause because as a recipient, you become directly responsible for the conditions of the grant. And not all of those conditions are actually within our control, such as making sure that the uses that the money is applied to are, as stated in the grant application, for example. I mean, we don't control that. We're not going to operate the program that this grant is going to fund. We're not going to take the place of the coalition. So I wanted to make sure that we protect the town. And the best way to do that, I think, is actually through a side agreement that we drafted and that Gio quickly took a look at as well, which makes clear that for certain conditions, the foundation, it's an agreement between the town, sorry, not the foundation, but the town and the coalition. The coalition takes responsibility for things like, progress reports, making sure that they are in compliance with the conditions of the grant and things like that. And I've also discussed this with the treasurer to make sure that she doesn't have a difficulty with this concept, and I believe everybody thinks that this can actually work. In my mind, it's not the ideal way to do things, but you can't really you can't really dispute with a grantor, how they should be doing that. And for them, it keeps things a little bit more easy to manage. So my recommendation is that you approve us accepting the grant on behalf of the coalition and to execute both the grant agreement with the Van Buren Foundation and the side agreement with the Newport County Prevention Coalition, and both documents were attached, I believe, to the request.
So it doesn't specifically use the word indemnification, but that's what we're getting in 1 and 2, where they say take responsibility for compliance. Is that the?
Effectively.
My only question in that regard is, should it contain some kind of language of what happens if the NCPC doesn't fulfill the obligations, or is that superfluous, or?
Yeah, I think you have enough protection in the contract is drafted, the oversight, in the end, the oversight lies with the town, and the control lies with the town.
I just don't.
No, but what I'm saying is, if, for whatever reason, NCPC were not able to fulfill the duties, does that mean that the town would therefore be obligated to do whatever?
Well, the town can't necessarily undertake the duties, but the town would be, responsible for either returning the balance of the funds to the grant or otherwise, coming up with another solution for complying and meeting the terms.
But we could chase them.
That
was my question.
Yeah.
I just don't understand what the grant is. I don't have anything. No Wrong Door Behavioral Health Integrated System of Care Program.
This is why Rebecca is here. She can shed some light on that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Thank you. I'm glad that you asked. Just a little bit of context. The Newport County Prevention Coalition came before the Tiverton Council in 2016 to request the support of the town of Tiverton as our fiscal agent. Previous to that, the town of Tiverton had been the fiscal agent for the Tiverton Prevention Coalition since 1987. So we've routinely brought grant money into the town through the town council or through the town treasurer's department and then out into the community to do this work. We have for many, many years, since 1987, been primarily a substance abuse prevention coalition. So we help deal with the prevention of youth underage drinking or marijuana use. In recent years, we've sort of expanded that mission to include mental health and the support of folks that need mental health treatment, recovery. And what we know to be true is that in Newport County, sometimes it's really difficult to access treatment. You need to have the right insurance, and you need to know who to call, and you need to be persistent about calling to get appointments. And it's a little bit easier sometimes on Aquidneck Island to get those services, but in the outlying communities like Tiverton and Little Compton, sometimes it's really a challenge to get those services, for whether it be for substance abuse treatment or for mental health treatment. So we sort of, under my leadership, the Newport County Prevention Coalition wrote a grant request to the Van Buren Foundation with some support from our partners at Newport Mental Health, Newport Hospital, Child and Family Services, to try to devise a program called No Wrong Door, so that if you're a person who's in crisis or you have a loved one who is in crisis and you pick up a phone and you call a treatment provider and they say, oh, gee, sorry, we don't take your insurance, it's not like a click at the end of the phone. Someone from that agency or from that service provider will say to you, you know, we don't do that here, but let me connect you directly with someone who can provide you with some support. So the No Wrong Door, I'd like a better title. It doesn't sound like the most professional endeavor, but the whole concept behind it is that no wrong door. If you pick up the phone or if you walk into a treatment provider, that's the right door, because someone there, even if they are not going to personally provide the service, they're going to connect you with where that service can be best provided. We've got some really strong partners on board. Like I mentioned, Newport Mental Health and Newport Hospital, also Kodak for folks that are experiencing opiate addiction, Child and Family. I know I'm leaving some out. The Hope Recovery Center, which is primarily set up for those folks who have gotten treatment for addiction and now are drug-free, but still need the support of counselors, et cetera. So, Mrs. Cook, I don't know if I answered your question. Maybe too much. Okay.
Well, I'm actually just wondering, so where does the grant money fit into that?
So the
strategy?
grant money for this grant is One portion of it is to hire a coordinator for that project who will basically staff the grant. So that will be the person who convenes all of the partners, gets them to the table, make sure that tasks brought up in those partnership meetings are followed through with and completed, goes out and promotes this effort in the community, so that for any of us who work with partners, sometimes you all come as equals to the table, and who's really going to do the heavy lifting? That's where this grant comes in, is sort of to make sure that someone walks away, that they're not relying on the volunteer efforts of those agency partners, but someone is going to walk away with a to-do list to make sure that we get all of those deliverables completed.
So somebody to coordinate all the partners and make sure the people who are on the phone know what to do. and
Right, there is a
coordinate.
training component to this, that staff person, that director will ensure that the training is done at all of those agencies, because one major component of this, I'm sorry, I can't see around the block. One major component of this is also to develop a uniform assessment tool or a uniform intake tool, so that if your family member or yourself, you're experiencing some challenges and you go into Newport Mental Health and you have an intake screening and it takes an hour and all of your information is all written down, and then they say, you know what, I think that we're not the perfect spot for you, but we'd like to get you over to Agency Z. That time, that intake tool travels with you, so that you don't have to start with the next agency and start from scratch again. Because we know that people, especially during their most vulnerable time, when they seek help, if that help is too arduous or the obstacles are too high, they're going to say forget it and walk away and sort of further that stressful time. So training, uniform tools being created, all of those will be on that, in the scope of work for that director.
Thank you.
Sure.
This looks like one I think we need a formal vote on, and again, we're happy to support our community partners. And if we've got a contract which also protects the town, may I have a motion to approve as presented?
I will move the approval to accept the $125,000 grant from the Van Buren Foundation on behalf of Newport County Prevention Coalition, inclusive of an authorization to sign a grant agreement designating the town.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any other questions or comments? Public? Just fine.
I'd just like to say, I've worked with Rebecca for all these years, and we had the Tiverton Prevention Coalition, you know that. Then they turned it into Newport County because the state wanted us to regionalize. And who did they choose to run Newport County? They chose Rebecca because she's truly the best. All the grants were applied for all the years. We've always gotten them, the federal grants, and everybody else doesn't get them until they call Rebecca to help write them, then they get them. But the answer to the question is, if we don't do what they say, the answer is you don't get another grant, because they're very strict. If you say you're going to do this, we have to sign in our volunteer hours when we go in and everything else. And so that's the answer to that question. If you don't do what you say you're going to do and you put paperwork in the next time, you're not getting it. Thank you. And thank you to Van Buren's for giving us this.
Okay, all those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a flurry of updates. We are running a little late, but I'm going to turn it over to Justin to take us down a list, and then we'll go through our usual roundtable. Mr. Katz.
I wasn't looking for anything extensive here, just in general an update on various issues of interest to me and the community, such as the fire department staffing, the town farm playground, staffing at the beaches, the purchase of industrial park land by Bill Sales, the solar ordinances, the yard sign ordinances, and also the cheese wheel farmers market. It's just a handful of things that occurred to me I hadn't kept up on, and I wanted to see where we are.
I'll try to do as quick as possible. Chief is here as well if there are further questions about fire department staffing. I think the big news there is that as of last week, we actually reached full complement of 28 firefighters, which also allows us to implement the new contract that provides for a hybrid 4-platoon system. It also means that we now have started to track the overtime in accordance with that contract, and I believe the chief is optimistic that we'll see that overtime drop significantly now that we have, in fact, the full staffing. So I don't know if you have further questions for the chief on that? No one? Okay.
Sounds like good news.
Thanks for coming anyway, chief.
Everybody's happy, I take it, that they work.
That's actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I do think this is a morale booster. And it certainly helps. I think the department is actually heading in a very good direction right now.
If I can just put my 2 cents in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I agree with that completely. I think the spirit of the department certainly has improved, and we're moving in the right direction. We're at a full complement now. The last 2 firefighters were hired on, they started on Monday, August 5th, and there's a 2-week period where they just kind of acclimate themselves to the different stations. We put them in Station 1, Station 2, Station 3, and at the end of that, everybody will be where they need to be, and I think we're doing well.
Chief, do we have a list established? Is there a list established, so if people do leave now, we have a list to go by?
There is, yep. There's a
Okay.
current list that, it's a 2-year list. So
Okay. I know.
qualified firefighters, candidates.
What does that mean, 2-year list?
Well, because if we have somebody retire or somebody leave, instead of having to advertise again, there's a list already established. That's why I was just
So
wondering
the
if there is a
the
list.
itself is for 2 years, you can call those
Yes.
people, is that how that works?
Yep.
That's great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, chief.
Thanks, Chief.
The next item is the Town Farm Playground. It may be that the DPW Director, Rick, you may need to give an update. If there are questions, I'm not sure yet if there are questions. I just didn't want you to leave. It's actually on the agenda of the Recreation Commission tonight. So unfortunately, the same date, but they're talking about it. And I think there's also an understanding that DPW Director is going to sit down with at least a chair. We've said, and I've made clear that this needs to be coordinated with DPW. Not a whole lot of progress has been made on the playground project, I think, to be fair. But there is still a desire to move forward with that. And again, we need to try and figure out how to divvy up the responsibilities, and also how we're going to raise enough money to do it. So it's a stay tuned type of answer.
Well, finances aside, is it feasible to have by spring of 2020?
I don't know for sure, because frankly, I had seen basically a possible proposal before from a particular vendor. I think it needs to probably be more of a competitive process to look into that. But if we have to go through that process, yeah, I think it could be done, and certainly should be the goal, I think, to have one by next spring.
Okay.
If there are no questions about that, beach staffing, as of today, there are actually 5 lifeguards and 8 attendants, which might be more than you would have expected to hear. It's not going to last very long, because by the end of this week, 2 lifeguards will be leaving, and some of the other folks have scheduling issues in that the school season is coming up, people are going back to school. People are already starting to do sports training, so that is beginning to affect the schedules. We will have 3 lifeguards remaining, one of which whom still needs to take the test, which she's taking this week, and hopefully so far everybody has passed everything, so that should help. The net effect is that we don't have perfect coverage, but we have reasonable coverage expected through August 25th. And then it's going to be difficult. I talked with Sarah, the coordinator, about Labor Day. We think we'll have coverage for Labor Day as well. After that, we're basically discontinuing the program, as far as I know, and that's what my understanding is we have done in the past. I will say, and I'm very pleased with the work that Sarah is putting in, and also with how she approaches this. She has done what I asked her to do, which is to learn from this year's lessons and identify those issues that we need to deal with in a different manner next time. But the other thing is that she is really hopeful that she can sort of groom almost like a little core of people who want to come back next year, so that we don't have to go through the exact same scramble as crazily as we had to do this year. And I'm very glad that she has that attitude and is developing those relationships with the kids that have been working for us this season.
One question I had on this in particular, I had heard at one point that council members were staffing the beach, which is great, but I hadn't known there was even a need to do that. So should there be established a list of people who are willing to jump in at that point, or so that?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that, probably could be perhaps organized better. As you probably agree, it's sort of the last resort. It's not something you want to organize so that we're now going to rely on that. And I think that's part of the issue, that we've done these things in a certain way and people jump in at the last minute and we manage to pull through. It's not the way to run a program. So having said that, if counselors are interested in volunteering, or we can have other volunteers on the list, I think it's something that we should talk with the Recreation Commission about.
I think Madam Clerk did an excellent job.
She did. Madam Clerk.
We have witnesses.
Madam Clerk was excellent at the booth.
Well,
And again, it was one of those, oops, what do we do now? Rather than being a little bit more prepared, because all of a sudden we didn't have enough.
When she retires, she has a career in being an attendant at the beach.
we'll have to take the surf test.
No, gate attendant, she's
Just the
not a
gate,
lifeguard, gate
okay.
attendant.
I guess what hit me when I read this, that, okay, these problems were going on, that it seemed to be a small core of people that knew about it, including council members. Who were they? And who were these people? I wasn't told. Which council members were told?
And what I just said was that this was a sudden, situation that developed suddenly, and people who happened to be involved already, such as Councilor Hilton and Councilor Perry, volunteered to jump in. That's all there is to it. There's no other story.
Yeah, being involved in the recreation, Sarah said, I have a problem with staffing, and I said, if you get stuck, you need a volunteer, I'll go down and do it. Being involved in the beach project, I think that's how Trish got involved.
No, I understand that.
like the day before. This wasn't something that was
We don't
planned.
want to volunteer. I mean,
No,
we were never given the chance.
No, this was a day before thing. This wasn't something we knew about weeks in advance. It was the day before. She said,
Reminds me,
tomorrow I don't have anybody.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I just remember in one of our prep calls, I think Justin and I were talking about, maybe this did come up in a prior meeting, like a list of volunteer opportunities. We don't have a volunteer, I don't think we have a volunteer coordinator, we just like from A to Z across the whole municipality, right? That they probably call you or call, so that may be, whether it's for community service hours that you might need for high school or.
Weeding at Grinnell's Beach?
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe something to kind of take away from this.
I mean,
Because
there are
there's no
things.
shortage.
Right.
Let's put volunteer for the planning board at the top of the list. And then.
Volunteering for anything, really.
Did we ever bring that up, or was that just something we were talking about at a prep?
We're looking for volunteer
Well, while we're on
referees
it,
during basketball season.
Maybe that's the takeaway. I know you're very busy, and I know what we think about. I know as a tax assessor, kind of helps with IT. Maybe that's something we can have as a bulletin board or something online of, sort of an informal wish list of volunteer opportunities.
And is that for volunteers in general, or specifically for council members who would like to
No, I don't think
volunteer?
across the board, yeah. Couldn't resist.
Just curious.
All right.
All right, the next one is Bill's Sales. They actually purchased the land in the industrial park, and they have been working on the proposal. They have a date with the planning board on September 20th, I am told. So they are pursuing this project at this time. That doesn't mean they're done. They have to go through the planning and the the review
So
and
the
everything else.
conveyance happened, the deed is signed,
Oh, wait a minute.
No.
No. We have the PNS.
just, you know.
PNS, yeah.
That was a look of surprise on my face. I thought the same thing. When
It was a test.
I want to be able to say we sold a parcel, but I guess the ink is not on the deed yet.
So I have a question about that because the PNS was based on their getting their approvals and.
Getting what?
Getting their approvals, the
Yes.
zoning approvals that they're gonna need. Was there a deadline on those zoning approvals? For some reason, it sticks in my head that there is a period of, not that we necessarily have to hold them to that deadline, but has anybody looked at the PNS to make sure it hasn't expired or isn't about to expire?
We are going to be speaking with them about it. There typically is language in the PNS that specifies a period. I think in this case, it gave more time because we knew that more work had to be done to explore the site and see what the story is. That may have taken more than was originally anticipated. But also typically, these PNS agreements are pretty flexible in their language.
I mean, I understand it takes more time. I don't have a problem with that. I just
No, I had the same
was
concern.
wondering if anybody looked at that PNS just to make sure the dates are still going to work for bill sales.
That's exactly why I called the attorney and say, time has gone by and where are we on this? So.
Okay.
Ask him if he wants to process yard waste too. Please.
Well, actually, that has gone through my mind as well.
He's into wood.
It would be a good co-location, actually.
Okay.
The next one, I don't have really the update on, but I think Sue may have the update on where exactly we are with the solar ordinance. If she wants to.
So if you had a little more time, or I know you got a lot on your plate, so.
I know. We had staggering here. We'd started working on it, gone through it. It looked like at 5 other communities, worked on, I think I gave you that last update. And I started trying to compile all that information. I went through with a couple of the other members. So it's ready, it's kind of at that point. I just the last 2 months I haven't gotten back to it. So what I would like to do is get that ready so it can come to the planning board. So that we can comment on it, and then the next step is to come to you. It's a pretty dense document. What I'd like to suggest is even if the council was interested in doing a workshop, so we can go through it, because if you look at it to help you understand what it is and why we're doing what we're suggesting for it, I think that will help you and help the process when you get to the public hearing. The other things though that came up during the course of it was that basically, we really need to strengthen our comp plan in relation to solar. I asked Stu Hardy if he would be willing to come up with some comp plan amendments that also could accompany that. And then also, I've spoken to Dave Robert, the tax assessor, because there's also an accompanying tax ordinance that goes along with this. So I'm trying to get everything all at once to present, to have a complete package. I was hoping maybe in September we could have that kind of to the point where the planning board could review it, then maybe late September, October would be ready to come to the council. And if there's a way, we can get a workshop to go through it, I think it would be very helpful.
We have the 5th Monday in September. Justin's helping with a lot of scheduling, but
Yeah.
I definitely think we can make some.
Yeah,
progress.
after we go through it, then whatever, but I think that would be helpful for you guys, because then you're going to start getting public input, and if you kind of understand better what all's in it, and why it's there, and also, make your comments, whether you think it's too much, too little, or you have other ideas, you can do that and kind of get that going before it goes to the public, instead of trying to make up your mind on the spot at a public hearing, if it's acceptable, because there's a lot of information in there. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Sue, the next one is yours too.
No, there's not a whole lot. We
It's still-
distributed the information. We've just, our 2 meetings in August were very big, and by the time we got to even considering a zoning ordinance, everybody pretty much had their brains burned out. So we didn't get to it. I did draft some things that I had taken from what had been submitted and tried to pull from that, specific to the temporary sign, because originally I thought we were supposed to be looking at the whole thing. But if you wanted just that, I had like a one-page thing, but the whole planning board hasn't looked at it and commented on it. So if you want us to have that opportunity to do that, we would like to get the extension and then submit that to you for your review. Okay?
Could I ask, though, does the,
Sure.
I'm not implying anything, but does the
Yeah.
planning board really want to look at this, or is it just, I mean, because...
Well, we're supposed to look at it. Every zoning ordinance is supposed to go to review by the planning board, and then our advisory recommendation goes to the council, because we deal with that a lot more. And it's basically to assist you, to
Right.
guide you in the general direction, but then when it comes to the public hearing, then you get public input and your own ideas as well on it, but we got to do the groundwork for it. Okay?
And lastly, the Cheese Wheels Farmers Market applications, my understanding, was withdrawn.
Do we know why, or?
I think they're looking at doing something differently. I don't have the details, but my understanding was withdrawn. I don't know if the clerk has more information. The farmer's market thing?
Oh, I heard that he had withdrawn that idea because he's looking to expand and purchase the building and expand into some things. So I think for this year, he has withdrawn.
We did the antique cars. Silver.
That one has gone forward.
Okay, we are in the home stretch here. Town administrator has 4 items to give us updates on. 4 more items, that is. Back to you.
The first thing I wanted to mention is that Tony Lynn, the tax collector, took it upon herself to take the course and sit for the exam to become certified as a tax collector, and I just wanted to congratulate her on that, but also thank her for taking that initiative. I assume you're happy with it as well. Next is...
I never know. There's so many good things. I want to sort of like stand and applaud all of them, and I never quite know. I almost need like a protocol.
I think it just deserves to be mentioned, that's all.
Great. I'm sure the minutes so reflect.
Next thing I wanted to mention is that there is a decent possibility that the school department will actually join us in the contract that we have, or piggyback on the contract that we have. If you remember, not too long ago, you approved that contract whereby we're getting a discount on our electricity costs because of a solar project that we are participating in without having to do anything really. We got a particular discount rate. If the school department actually joins, that discount rate will increase. So we currently have a 28% discount. It will go up to 30%. Potentially, and the school department would get the same, so there would be savings on that end as well. They're a large consumer, so it makes a big difference. I'd actually hoped that this would happen earlier, but better late than never, and I'm optimistic that it will happen. It's being negotiated right now. And we've basically done all the heavy lifting in terms of the contractual stuff, so it shouldn't be that difficult. Then there are 2 programs I quickly want to mention. I think it may need to come back, but I just wanted to, you could tell me whether you want it to come back. They have something in common, which is that these are programs that provide services or benefits to residents, and in the case of one, businesses as well. One is what's called electricity aggregation program. You may recall that actually the town participated, or still participates, we're not sure whether we can continue, in the program that the League of Cities and Towns had developed for aggregated purchasing of electricity. And we had, through that program, a contract with Direct Energy. We're looking whether we can get a new contract with the successor to Direct Energy, but there is some question since we're no longer a member of the League at this point in time. This is not for the municipality, but rather for the residents, that they can get similar benefits. If the town, the role the town plays in here, and this can be the big question mark, I think, is the town would actually contract on behalf of residents with a supplier that would be selected through a competitive process by an outfit that's called, I forget now what I have it all here, Green Energy, and they work with the Green Energy Consumers Coalition as well. Good Energy, sorry, is the name of the private entity, and then Green Energy Coalition, they work together. They're very focused on solar and other renewable energy. This program would allow a few things for residents and businesses to do. One is to increase, if they wish, the portion of their electricity that comes from renewable resources. Some people really would like to do that. Other people couldn't care less, probably, and it's optional. You have a choice. There's certain options available. You can go to 100% if you want, or you can go to 5% or 0%. So that's optional. Also, all of this is voluntary. It's not something that people are forced to do just because the town thinks it's a good idea. It's an optional program, but it does involve ultimately, and I would need to get additional information, have reviewed by the solicitor, the town entering into a contract ultimately with the supplier on behalf of. So it's basically, this gives residents and businesses access to certain benefits that otherwise they have not as good access to. And if that is in principle something that you say is worth further exploring, I would suggest that we have a presentation, by these entities to the council at some point in time, whenever it's convenient for the council. The other program is somewhat similar, but it has to do with water and sewer lines. And there, the issue is that residents are responsible for the lines that run from the utility connection to their property. And from time to time, you do have mishaps or repairs that need to be done, and they can be very costly. And this type of program provides a warranty program. You pay X amount per month or per year, and for that you are covered for all kinds of repairs and replacements up to certain amounts. $4,000, I believe, for the sewer line issues, and $3,000 per occurrence for the water lines. And so the question there is, again, you have an entity that arranges, they enter actually directly into the contract with the residents. That what the town does is only, but not insignificantly, allow use of its logo for purposes of marketing to residents and businesses. This is a program that is nationally endorsed by the National League of Cities, and they're operating in lots of states and lots of municipalities. They are trying to get into more of the Northeast states as well, and so they've asked if there would be an interest here. And I'm only raising, because this is sort of a model that is beginning to happen, and if the council believes that, it's worth looking into, if it could be beneficial to the residents, then we can, again, arrange for a presentation and provide additional information. And that may be not enough for you to say, yeah, go ahead and schedule a presentation. I'm not sure. I could go in more detail, but probably takes longer than we currently have.
We'll put that on the tracker at least, so we don't let it fall off the menu. Madam Clerk?
Well, then I'm done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Are you sure? Did you have enough airtime today?
I've been on a roll all night.
Agenda request procedures.
Oh, yes, now that I have a deputy, she's going to be much more assertive than I am on this stuff. So, she's quickly finding out that we're here later than we should be nights working on council. It also creates overtime. So we just want to stress that we're going to start really enforcing this, and with every item that any department head brings forth, or there should be a cover sheet or the agenda request, or we're going to have to stop accepting them. So
I'd
we're
like to
just
add-
letting you know, we're going to be more forceful in our our governance policy and enforcing what is already stated in there. And deadlines, she says. Right.
See, this is what happens when we let Madam Clerk work down at the guardhouse. All of a sudden, she's...
They start slacking.
I'd like to say too, I don't know if it's on this version of the form, but I do ask, I think it's in our rules, but maybe it is, giving us a sense of how much agenda time you'd like. Makes it a lot easier to schedule these, because we try to keep these meetings at 3 hours. So that's also very helpful. You'll get on eventually. We don't keep anybody off the agenda, but if we don't know how long you'll be here, it might take longer to get on.
So am I going to get like a paper from you or something, or are you going to say what you want, or?
No, it's just enforcing the governance policy that's already written in there, how
There's a
the
new
agenda.
deputy in town, is really what we're saying.
There's a new deputy, we're getting things, an hour before the deadlines. We can't get it on clerk base. We missed clerk base this time, it didn't get on till this morning. It's how slip-ups going to happen.
And by the way, if anybody needs any help filling out these forms or anything, you can always call me or Justin. We're happy to help you. All right. Mr. Solicitor, boy, we're trying to, sometimes you can't help. We got 2 more cases, it looks like. Is that,
Yeah, just wanted to make you aware, I think these were, I believe they were already circulated by the clerk, copies of the complaints that were filed. These have both been pushed off to the interlocal trust for their coverage decision, which I would hope would take them off of the town's plate. One is a false arrest complaint, and the other is a personal injury complaint.
and for all of these, you're looking at any patterns without speaking to any specifics. We had, say, 15 false arrest cases in a row, and then I'm sure everybody's
We would
taking
certainly
note.
bring that to your attention.
Okay, the floor is open. Anything from the council? Okay, we're a little late today. We do have an executive session tonight with 2 matters, and I'd just like to note, I think we've had 9 unanimous decisions, including a couple tough ones tonight. And just know that that doesn't happen without a lot of the hard work from the sports and the rest of the management, so appreciate that. We will, with that, close the open session here at 9:36, and we propose to go into closed executive session. The first matter being a litigation matter under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A2. This is a live case in Newport County, 2017-0169. McGinnis as the trustee of Tiverton Associates Trust versus the town of Tiverton. This is sponsored by Councilor Hilton and Dean Medeiros. May I have a motion to go into executive session for that matter?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Aye, yes. And then to remain in executive session for a personnel matter under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A1. Job performance matter of our town administrator, notice has been given. I am the sponsor of that. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
And a
Yes.
roll call.
Yes.
Yes?
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great evening.